Thanks, everybody. My name is Phil Calvin. I lead the engineering team for the platform here at Salesforce. Second, we'll introduce everybody else that's up here. And but the first thing is, and I'm sure you've seen many times, many ways, the forward-looking statement. This session in particular, the forward-looking statement very much applies. You have the engineering team up here. You can ask us questions, and there'll be the usual safe harbor statement. So with that, I'll just get everyone to give a quick introduction to each other, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, I'm Desi Sadrizadeh. I'm VP of Engineering for the Lightning Platform Foundation, and essentially I lead the underlying services, framework, component space, and the guts of the platform, the Lightning Platform.
Cool. I'm Walter MACKLEM. I'm the Chief Architect of Product Engineering here. I've been at Salesforce for about 12 years now.
I'm Shauna Wolverton, and one of these things is not like the other. While I am not a developer, if it has to do with Lightning and it's not engineering, it's me.
We're happy to have Sean up here anyway. I'm Jim Wunderlich. I am a principal architect that's been driving the Salesforce DX product.
Hi, I'm Matt Small. I'm leading the Apex organization and teams.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. So what we're going to do, it's open mic. We don't have an agenda. Anybody has some questions, if you don't have questions, just hop up to the mic and let's go from there.
I would like to know what developer conferences are must attend for you guys.
Oh, that's a good question. I'll give you a quick few that I pay attention to, and then I let everybody to jump in. I think definitely WWDC is a conference that I pay attention to. Same with Google I/O. Those are two very, very mobile-centric, obviously, in their respective industries. Those would be two that I would definitely pay attention to. Other ideas?
My team pays attention to Velocity Conference, which happens on an annual basis and is focused on performance.
Google I/O and reInvent. reInvent.
My background's in internationalization and globalization, so I love the Unicode conference, but it's probably just me.
Well, I'm a back-end developer, so I'm big in Java 1, and so.
Yeah, my background's in background development as well.
Okay.
Hello. I would like to know more about the hammer test. My understanding was that you folks run all of the unit tests on various orgs and so on, and you look for things that pass on the old version and fail on the new version. We had an experience in Spring where, in fact, that happened on packaging orgs for distributed managed packages, and it showed, yes, they failed the hammer test. And we had to fight tooth and nail to convince support and the dev team that that was actually a breaking change. And we're sort of astonished that that didn't raise all kinds of automatic flags that, here you have a packaging org for a released package that's failing the hammer test, and those always pass because you can't upload with a failure. Mm-hmm. And we had to fight so hard, and finally, they versioned that particular issue, but that raised, in my mind, questions about what are you folks doing nowadays with the hammer test, really?
I can take a crack at that. I mean, I think we look at the hammer environment and and what happens when we run our hammer test as a gating criteria. Like, I don't know this particular issue, but I'm happy to dig in more detail as far as what happened. But we do look at the health of the hammer tests and the hammer runs as a gating criteria for any of our releases. I'm happy to dig into the specifics of your issue to find out why you had to convince support. It was an actual issue or the product team, but reach out to me afterwards. I don't know.
I can add a little bit. Go ahead.
I'd also be really curious to hear that. We take the hammer runs really seriously. We spend a lot of time triaging them, looking at those individual issues. So I'd also love to hear more about your specific issue and what happened.
Yeah, I mean, we're expanding our hammer program. We are not backing away from the hammer program. We do miss things once in a while. I mean, no testing is perfect, but we recognize that, and we are investing to expand it, not contract it. It is a permanent feature
Okay.
of Salesforce.
I'll dig up the case number. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure I can
please do.
that.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. My question is not developer-oriented, I'm not sure. It's about Lightning experience. I've migrated my organization to Lightning experience. I invested a lot of time, and the users also invested a lot of time to migrate for it, and eventually they asked me, all of them, a question, okay, so we invested a lot of time to learn the new UI and UX, and it's cool, and it's awesome, but what have you given me more? What do I get from it? And except from a lot of lacking of features that sometimes this doesn't exist, and this doesn't exist, and I'm as a developer, so I'm trying to develop and to fill up the space, but still some things are missing. So I gave them something that's very cool, but I changed their ways of work and made them a lot of work because of that. And I didn't give them any other or added value.
Oh, Phil,
as you say.
please. Me.
I will defer to my product
question is,
management. But I think there's two parts to it. There's the roadmap and what we're talking about, but there's also the technical transformation. But
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So we actually think we gave you a lot of things, so maybe we're not doing a really good job of communicating them. There's a whole bunch of features that are only in Lightning. Right now, there's about 500 of them, and almost all of them are focused on making your users more productive. So the Kanban view, the whole idea of the new navigation bar that gets you to things very quickly, the whole idea of the timeline and the workspace that's more about doing work than just kind of data entry. So we're constantly trying to give you things. Our whole theory about Lightning migration is carrots instead of sticks. So we want to give you as many reasons to go. We're not ever going to say, return. There's a bunch of people who are like, Sean, you have to tell them you're going to turn it off or they'll never move. Nope, not doing it, right? We want you to move on your own time. We know it's a big move, and we have a lot of understanding about that. But in addition, there's just a whole new level of customization with Lightning, and just the things you can do with pages without coding and with coding in Lightning today leaves the page layout editor in the dust. So we think we definitely have intention to make it way better for you and for your users. And if they're not seeing that, that feedback is great, and we'd love to follow up with you and hear more about that. Because we're trying to build more and more. We're hearing from our customers that they're more productive in Lightning compared to a giant list of fields. But if you're not seeing that, then I'd love to talk to you and see how we can help.
I'm seeing that. Maybe I'm a developer and not an admin, so maybe this is a problem that I don't know all, or what I can add more to my org and to my users to.
Yeah, one of the things we're realizing we need to do is give people like you in this room the tools to talk to your users about how it's going to be different and what's better in Lightning. I think we're out in the world talking, but we need to do that one level deeper so that the people who are advocating for this change or who are implementing this change have the tools to talk to their users as well. Your end users aren't coming to Moscone to hear from us, so we need to help you have those conversations.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
thanks.
Hi. I worked for an ISV partner, and one of the worst things we run into when dealing with our clients is they often run into CPU timeout exceptions. We have a lot of logic on leads, contacts, campaign members, and a lot of our clients have a lot of workflows, triggers on those objects, and CPU limits are shared across all namespaces. So if we have a trigger that throws this exception, we get blamed for the error, and it's very hard to prove that it's not actually necessarily our fault because something else might be taking up 9 seconds of CPU time, whereas we are only using like 1 second of CPU time. And it's very hard right now to prove that it's not us because the debug logs don't really give more insight of what's causing the error. So I was wondering if there's anything on the roadmap to help ISV developers with this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's painful, and I imagine it's very frustrating to see this. You just see this error, and your customer is complaining, and it's hard to pick it apart. So we've been talking internally about how we can. I think the best case would be split it out into a separate limit. I think that's very long term, but maybe just giving you access to the debug logs to show you this difference. So it's on the roadmap. We're looking into it. I don't have a release for it. There's some real challenges picking that apart.
Thanks.
Yeah, but it's a great
I
question.
could also like to add that limits in general are being constantly reviewed and improved. And there's a project going on right now that is hopefully going to even make that less important.
Hey, so I actually have two things. One, I just want to say thank you for the Lightning console OEM that's coming. We've been waiting for like 5 years. So thank you for actually making that happen. And I think the last thing is just pricing on that.
Yep.
So that's going to be amazing, I think, for us. But two, we use field sets very, very, very heavily. And so the biggest thing that it's keeping us from migrating our customers to Lightning is having to switch back to Classic to manage field sets. So any ETA on field sets for Lightning?
Right. We know that that's one of the most requested features right now, and it's definitely something we're looking into. So we are working towards providing that as well.
I don't think field sets in setup are targeted for winter, but I suspect they'll be in the spring.
Yep.
Right.
I have another question. Are there any things on the roadmap for new features coming into Apex, as far as lambdas or functional constructs or?
Yes, there are absolutely things on the roadmap. Specifically for lambdas and functional constructs, we're talking about that. We're really trying to figure out what do you want, actually. So it's great to hear, like, our lambdas kind of, is that top of your list? You missed them? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so absolutely. We've talked about those as well. Those aren't on the roadmap, but it's great to hear that you're interested in them. I would love them as well.
Quiet crowd.
Yeah.
Usually.
Alex, do you have a question, or are you trying to sneak out the back?
Depends on the answer. No, sort of along those lines, I had a fleeting use case, but I'd like to bring it back to execute JavaScript encapsulated in Apex on the core platform instead of having to go outside to do that. And I'd heard from somebody that might have been a project that was being explored. I wondered if there's any updates on that.
You're talking about like something running like Node or something like that, or just pure JavaScript, just whatever you like?
Running JavaScript libraries to render things and then email them out, perhaps, and not have to leave the platform to do so.
Is there a reason running that as a Heroku service isn't appropriate, or just not tied in enough for you?
It's overhead we didn't want to have to own, and the use case was, it was kind of enough of a not even microservice, but just a particular use case. Customer wanted to render things with a certain JavaScript visualization library and email them out to Salesforce users, and just didn't want to have to go out to do that. And I think there was some, to do Salesforce scheduled reports, they were exploring that.
There's definitely been investigations. It's a fairly deep rabbit hole from a deployment and security viewpoint, and at this point, there's nothing that we have.
Yeah, I was just wondering about APIs within Apex. And it's great that Summer 17 brought out CMTs and page layouts in Apex. The reporting API is kind of old. There's some serious limitations in there with the number of records that could be retrieved and how that affects governor limits. But in addition to that, just general API, what else can we look forward to in Apex to not have to go through the metadata toolkit to manipulate anything from that side?
I could answer that. So yeah. At a minimum, we're going to expand the number of objects that you can directly access from Apex with the new metadata change. So that expansion is on the roadmap. I can't tell you how soon, but that was just down payment, what you saw with layouts and CMT. So that group will be expanding. Did you want to add something?
No, I mean, we want to ensure that kind of we continue to expand that, expose more things in Apex, I think, generally. And definitely, if you can let us know of places that you see either the support is old or kind of lacking. I think that's helpful for us to know where we need to focus.
And reporting API definitely
Reporting
needs
API.
some, help. Yes, please.
And with things like that, we can help direct it to the right team.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Since the start of Lightning Experience, I know some of our customers have expressed concerns about performance of page loads. I know there's been a lot of improvements made over the last few releases, so thank you to the team for doing those. What else can we look forward to in terms of performance improvements around Lightning Experience, Lightning Components, Lightning Communities, and so on?
Desi, you want to take a crack?
Yeah, absolutely. Performance has been one of our biggest focuses, and we've gotten amazing feedback from the customers and ISVs and partners on the Spring release. We've been essentially looking at every layer of the system on how we optimize the performance and make it more seamless experience for the users. But in addition to that, in terms of developer capability, which will enable you to develop performance experiences, we are providing to you a full set of base components which are based on SLDS, and you'll be able to have a pretty performant experience with those. The Lightning Data Service, which will enable you to leverage records data with client-side caching, is another thing that you should look into, and a lot of other things that are coming down the line. But that is going to be our continuous focus.
Great. And then on the Lightning component development side, I know that there's a lot of smarts that goes into sort of box carrying up requests and so on, so that they're the most efficient. Are there any plans to let developers have more control over some of that process if we sort of, as we dig down through troubleshooting, identify areas where we want to manipulate that process a little bit?
What specifically are you looking for in terms of control over in a developer workflow?
I think it's to do with certain scenarios where you have multiple components on a page and certain requests get bucketed together, and then some of those requests, pieces of those requests actually return very quickly, but those components, the client-side rendering part of that has to wait until that whole set finishes. So if we have ways to sort of try and cut those up into pieces a little bit, or rechange the priority, resequence. The exact details, I'm not too sure how that would be implemented, but just wondering what the...
Through a more declarative way?
Potentially declarative, or even programmatic is fine if we have to do it that way.
Okay. We are looking into a number of tooling that will enable the developers programmatically or declaratively to do wizard-like or have more hands-on debugging and control over the developer experience. So some of it will be coming out in the winter and further releases. So, but would love to get more feedback from you after the session.
It's a little bit of a balancing act, to be honest, because we don't want to necessarily give you as a component author complete control, because you have the ability to completely hose the rest of the system. Yeah, so we have a bit of a balancing act that we're doing, and part of it is in how we sequence the XHRs, and part of it is in the protocols that we use to go across. So Desi and her team and the rest of Lightning are definitely looking at options, but we're being a little bit careful on the amount of levers we give you.
Right. Thank you.
I've been working on a number of trigger framework items and things related to that in regards to Apex tools for all of the S objects in our org. And one thing that I found that's lacking in the Apex language is generics. Can you give any feedback onto any development in that direction or anything? It's really specific, I know, but.
That's a good question. Not from here, but I wonder, I have some Apex developers. I wonder if we can connect after the talk and kind of drill down into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Wonderful.
So I've been working with Apex class and Visualforce last couple of months, and I was looking online regards to IDE that I need to use, and some of the suggestion was, Sublime with a Mavmate and Eclipse. I tried those two, and I wasn't really happy with performance. I was wondering if there's any future development on IDE just for Salesforce, or maybe partnership with other Microsoft, or possibly with JetBrains. I don't know how you guys are going to work on that, but I was trying to see, is there a better way?
Jim, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. There is our new version of our Eclipse plugin that was released at this conference. We're also basically expanding it into VS Code soon. We're also supporting the people like Illuminati Cloud, which is built on IntelliJ. So we're trying to make sure that they keep up with our changes to SFDX. So I think you'll have a wide variety of performant IDEs to choose from. The original legacy one, which is that you just ran into, not very impressive. Some of the work that's being done on the Apex compilers will also make that, especially in the Apex world, make that much more performant. But you'll see those coming out in the next, even now, all the way through the next year.
So when is the timeline in terms of?
Well, some of it is available now,
okay,
and you'll see more of it kind of roll out. Okay. And I know the Illuminati Cloud's quickly trying to adapt to the SFDX tool set, so hopefully that will keep up with us also. So I think you'll see a great improvement by the time you get here next year. You should have a wide variety of choices.
I would definitely encourage you to try Salesforce DX and some of the stuff that Jim and his team have been leading. It opens up the IDE development framework and into a much more normal development model.
Thank you.
So as we have products shifting more and more to front-end components and components living inside a record page with a lot around them, for us as ISVs, measuring actual page time load is not really efficient anymore, and it's not really helpful to know how well our components are performing. I'd love to hear kind of roadmap or anything interesting about how we can measure specific component load time and component performance in the page.
Yes.
So one thing that we're doing right now is with the spring release, we are doing some validation on safe transactions as you guys develop the components to measure and ensure that you are using best practices and patterns towards performant experiences. And in addition, we do have tools that are available as Google Chrome extension. Recently, we're just released another optimizer tool where you can profile the components for performance. So that's another extension as part of the developer extension that we have on the Google Chrome.
Cool. Thank you.
Hi, this is Bhavishya from Market Traders. I have two issues to talk about. First of all, we are like sending a lot of emails through Apex classes, and we always hit, since we are growing every day, and right now it's like only 5,000 emails governor limit. So is there any chances that you increase the limit, and so we can send a more, I know we can also send it through workflow, but since we are already near to limitations for workflow rules, so since that's why we are sending through Apex classes. So is there any a kind of solution on that?
And that's specifically a limit to how many emails you can send via Apex classes. That's going to be a downstream limit specific to that team. So actually, I don't have an answer for you, unfortunately. But
so I think fundamentally what you're finding is that Salesforce traditional CRM is not meant to be a mass mailing tool. And so that's why we've augmented our portfolio with a whole bunch of things like Pardot and Marketing Cloud for people who want to send high volume email. They have a lot of the guardrails to prevent spam and to do more and really help delivery. I mean, if you start delivering more than 5,000 emails a day through the Salesforce domain, most of those aren't going to get delivered, right? And so we have now additional tools where there's people who are really focused on delivery and mass email at scale. So I think that's where I would point you rather than if you, I don't think we will be raising those limits.
Okay. My second question is related with reports. So we only use just a few standard objects, and we have a lot of custom objects. And in the standard objects, we have almost like more than 150 fields. So, so let's say in the accounting, we are using a lot of reporting. We used to use those reports very smoothly once in a while, but right now we always hit limit, so that you cannot see that report, or we cannot even customize the report. So is there any solution on the report side?
Why don't you reach out to me afterwards, and we'll connect you up with the team to do. That sounds like a bug or a limit we need to track down. So reach out to me afterwards, and, and we'll.
And I definitely recommend, if you haven't logged a case, we have a customer-centric engineering team that can help do some tuning behind the scenes on your organization if you're having specific issues with reports in your org.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Chris. I am a technical recruiter. And one of the challenges that I have with a lot of my clients are finding qualified Lightning developers. Is there any plans to offer a Lightning certification to help? I see a lot of resumes that say they know it. I start drilling down the technicalities of it, and they really don't know the product. And so I'm wondering if a certification will help advance the knowledge of Lightning.
Have you seen there's definitely Trailhead modules that are doing that's the sort of the first step I would see. Are you talking about a deeper course?
An actual cert.
Yes. An actual certification?
Yeah.
I'm not Desi. Do you know? Do you guys know?
Yeah, my understanding is that course is under development. We're just trying to get all the resources together. We're bringing together University and Trailhead to figure out how we do certs. You might have seen we've made some changes in certs lately. Some of them are moving to Trailhead, so I think as that settles out, we'll definitely be bringing a Lightning cert to market.
Okay, great.
Trailhead, and we're bringing some of the Lightning experience development best practices in the standard developer 201, 401 trainings as well.
Yeah, there's a test, though, that people get to be certified, so we should have one of those for Lightning developers as well. What we'll probably actually do is just make it part of the dev certificate generally. Lightning just is now.
Another great source of reference for you would be the blog post, the developer community blog post in terms of developer experience and best practices, which are pretty educational as well.
Hi. So I've seen a lot of cool stuff at this this conference, and I feel like for the past 2 or 3 years, there's just been a lot of Christmas presents for us developers in Salesforce. So thank you for that. My question is concerning logging. Is there any Christmas presents for us in the future that would make logging easier?
Say more words.
What's that?
Say more words about what you want login to do.
Okay, so I mean, I did Java before Salesforce and .NET before that.
Can you stand closer to the mic?
Sorry, I did Java and .NET before Salesforce, so there's a lot of sophisticated logging tools around there. And I've
logging.
seen logging.
Oh, I heard login. Sorry, you were so far away from the.
Yeah, Apex.
So you're specifically Apex you're talking about, right? Yeah, Matt?
Yes.
What are you going to say about that?
Yeah, I would love to get just kind of, are you talking about the just robust logging things, Log4j, kind of more expansive libraries?
Correct. So we can just kind of look at the log section that we're interested in, and maybe even have log aggregation, so we can export our logs out of Salesforce, put them into something like Elasticsearch or Splunk.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's on the roadmap, but I'd love to look into that. It's great to hear that that's something you're interested in. I know we make incremental improvements to logs, but I don't think we've really thought about really getting in there and making a lot of improvements. So if that's something you'd like to see.
I can say it's from a tooling point of view in SFDX, that is on the roadmap, kind of like a lot of expansion, especially about sizes and getting to what you really want, is on the roadmap without specifics. So it isn't being ignored. How's that sound? Without giving any we're not ready to renounce anything, but it is not being ignored.
Look
That was
forward
a
to it.
completely fuzzy answer, I understand.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I have a fairly specific and deep Apex question, so maybe we can talk about it some other time. But the more my team has been looking into transaction control and shared static context, and the more we understand how static context works throughout the course of an Apex transaction, the more we realize that everything we've ever done for static flags to control things like trigger reentrancy or things like that, none of our solutions work across the board with batches of more than 200 that share static context, workflows that update fields, and how to look at trigger sets, things like that. Do you see any either changes to the way the platform does those things or best practices to teach developers how to do these things correctly? Because I haven't seen anyone actually do it based on the understanding that I built up trying to solve those problems.
That also sounds like something we should get more in depth on, much like generics. So I'd love to hear more about the challenges you've seen and what you've had to do to work around them. So we can really understand what the problem is that you're facing, and then we can make sure we get the solutions. You know, we're always trying to improve it, always trying to fix bugs. And where you see things that are inconsistent, we would love to make those consistent and to fix those. But if what you're really talking about is just kind of something more fundamental, I'd really love to dig in and really understand that.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
So this isn't so much a question as an observation and an idea, but this conference has been a delight. It's been great not to be overwhelmed by people. It's been very great to be able to go out to dinner and not have crowded restaurants. It's been great to have affordable hotel rooms. Have you given any thought to maybe minimizing or eliminating the dev zone of Dreamforce and just making this like a 3-day conference, 4-day, bring in community content, turn this into a real developer home, because it's just so much more pleasant.
I think I'll give you my perspective. I don't know if you guys have a perspective. I mean, I love the fact that we're doing a developer conference. I'd definitely like to see it grow, and I'd like to see it continue to grow. I don't think at Salesforce we ever really minimize things. So I don't see that Dreamforce getting smaller for sure. I see Dreamforce as Dreamforce, and it's a cornerstone of the company. It's nice that it is a blend of the development plus the application side of it. I think that defines Salesforce. But that means, to me, I want this conference to grow, and as we start to expand the developer community and the admin community more focused. And I do like the fact that there's a little bit of space too, personally. So, you guys, anything else?
There was a lot of space the second year of Dreamforce too, so don't count on that one
Yeah.
long term, right?
Perfect. My question is around full sandboxes and the fact that even in full sandbox, there are certain things that aren't 100% parity with production. So for example, being able to do custom domains with force.com sites and communities. There's certain governor limits that are still slightly different, even in sort of things throughout other sandboxes or production, like inside a test context versus real runtime context. Are there plans to bring parity to at least full sandboxes so that we can have a true production-like process, deployment and so on in there?
I think the answer to that is centering around DX and having that as your development process rather than trying to make sandbox into production. But I don't know what your perspective, Jim or Walter, on that.
I mean, I'm going to give another fuzzy answer. You know, part of the sandbox story, we're shifting into what we were calling Salesforce DX, right? Mm-hmm. Sandbox is critical to that story also. Yeah. By the time you come back in Dreamforce, so I hope everyone's coming back for Dreamforce, we'll have a lot more sandbox in our story. It won't be quite as separate as it is right now. We do need to bring those closer together, especially when there's some of those fuzzy limits, because the primary purpose of sandboxes in the Salesforce DX story is to do that user acceptance testing, that final integration testing before it goes to production. So we need, you know, any of those that you can file a case for, that would be awesome, right? Because that's how you can get those things into the hopper for us to consider. Because there's a whole bunch of little ones, right? So the more people that say, this thing is killing us, the more likely it is to bubble to the top. But we do have a team dedicated to improving the sandbox environment in general and bringing it into the Salesforce DX story.
Yeah, I think the Salesforce DX launch that's come out at this conference is fantastic for the development cycle, sort of getting some improvements on that infrastructure and platform side around things like the custom domains. You know, customers who are nervous about us doing the process of setting up a custom domain for their community for the very first time in production without trying it anywhere else, they get a little nervous at that, so we'd love to be able to do that.
Yeah. Great.
On that note, that sounds like a very, very specific use case that we will follow up with me and we'll connect you with the. You did? Okay. Steven's got it.
Actually, I could have just asked Steven to answer the question.
Yeah.
So this is a specific question related to the Marketing Cloud sandboxes. Are you planning any time to release them to the developers? I know Salesforce strategically buying a lot of companies like Demandware. Now we have onboard new child in the family, Commerce Cloud. So anytime soon, are you thinking to open up those sandboxes? Because Marketing Cloud is like almost 3 years right now, 3 to 4 years in the stack.
I'm not intimately aware, but I don't believe that is currently on the roadmap. But I can take that back to the team.
Thank you.
Okay, I have another question. Platform events are great, but is there any plans to make them part of the transaction? So that if you publish the event and then what you did failed?
No.
No?
That was easy. No, and there's a reason why. Originally, it was part of the transaction, and we've changed that semantic to follow more the standard form that the industry is adopting. So it wasn't like we couldn't do it within the transaction, because in fact it was originally. So we did that change on purpose. So unless someone says this was all wrong or the industry changes, it probably won't go back. So you have to, there's benefits to it. So.
Yeah, to add a little bit to that, so all of your CRM data and Force.com data is going into relational database with ACID semantics. For messaging, we're just adopting open source technology, Kafka, as our distributed messaging broker for PubSub, and no ACID support there.
So there are a lot of orgs, a lot of customers that have hundreds of thousands of lines of code, or even millions of lines of code, thousands of Apex classes, and people have already mentioned things like lambdas or whatever. But there's even more basic things that Apex is lacking. Packages or namespaces, or a way to organize your 5,000 or 10,000 Apex classes. And there's also things like we don't have access to the wealth of the Java libraries that are out there, the Python libraries that are out there. When can I drop a jar into Salesforce or something like that? Or what can we expect out of Apex? I feel like it just needs a massive shot of features. Or let's figure out how to run our jars on Salesforce.
I would love to let you be able to do that as well, because I think one of Java's main advantages is just the wealth of library support for it, and it's amazing. They're just whatever you want there's a jar or a GitHub project or something. So I would love to be able to do that if we can figure out how to do that safely, within our governor limits and everything else. And that is something that.
I'd like to ask what you mean by a jar, though. You mean like Java bytecode? That part of the jar, or just a good modular library system?
So, modular, that's another thing, just the idea of having dependencies and transitive dependencies and something that resolves those. And
right, and that is central to the core of this SFDX story. And if you saw a little bit of packaging, I don't know if you've heard this new packaging, that's the underpinning of the technology that we're building, that we're going to be able to build that kind of modularization, especially around Apex, along combined with the new compiler. Those things are the underpinnings we're doing right now, and by Dreamforce and the next time here this year, you will see some of that story.
Yeah, I was in the packaging too, and there's a lot of great stuff there, but like I said, it really doesn't address the Apex features and access, again, to
different thing.
Exactly, and it's just like the way that you guys build Salesforce. You build it on Java and Scala, and you've got access to all these things, and we would love that too. And again, just a sane way to access or to organize large code bases and modularize them better. Prevent classes from forming dependencies on every other class in your org, and having basically no control over that. So.
And that is, some of those things I can say we're working on right now.
Right.
And you'll see more in Dreamforce and more of that.
Yeah.
It's when you get to the Apex features specifically, it gets a little, that's more in Matt's area.
Okay.
So.
And what I meant by jar was, whether how you translate that into bytecode or whatever. I think that's more on the Salesforce side. But yeah, the typical, any Java,
Yeah, I was wondering if you were using jar to say I just want to run Java. So that's why I was asking. So.
That's that'd be one solution to the problem.
It'd be great. Yeah, it'd be awesome.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Race.
I would. That question prompted one that I had been thinking of for a while. What are easier ways to share code in Apex? Because right now I could have a gist and I could just copy and paste that in my org, or I can download a managed package, but I have no access to that code. I don't know if the developer is going to be updating that managed package.
Yeah, once again, this is central to the Salesforce DX story. Once again, I have to mention package 2 because we've had to change some foundational technology that we have inside our core platform before we could build some of these other features that would look like you could use that. So we have full intention to have modular libraries where you could distribute a library and it would still be upgradable so that people could consume it. We have tentative plans to have some kind of an open source community that can manage a single managed package. I don't want to use the word managed package because that's going away. They're all packages in the future. There's things on the roadmap that is addressing those things directly. And I can't wait to stand up here and say, here, what do you mean? You're not using modular, Apex? Everyone's doing it. So it's in the roadmap.
Follow-up to the modular Apex with Salesforce DX. Do you foresee people having modules inside of their own production org? So here's a module that I use for opportunities, or would it just be all in one package?
No, the central to the Salesforce DX is modularization. So since you can have a namespace, which is then becoming a true namespace, which is just a name qualifier to make uniqueness, and it has nothing to do with packaging, you can make a whole bunch of packages with package 2 for one namespace. So we want people to break them up into small reusable units, right, that you can test independently, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how we vision it. And hopefully at some point, we won't even necessarily have to copy it into your org. I mean, that's the ultimate result that we'd like to get to someday. So the whole idea is to really make it a jar. Someone mentioned the jar. We're using the jar model and trying to implement that right now for Apex. That's why I asked why it was a jar. But unfortunately, it's still not bytecode, but not like now, at least.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Sure.
About Salesforce DX. So first, thank you. We've waited many years for some kind of a change in the development environment, and this is really cool. One thing that I thought about and what I understood from this conference, you said it's the real source of truth now is my Git. But what I understood, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's that eventually the org is the source of truth, because if I change something in my org, eventually this is what's happening. This is what's happening. This is the source of truth. And what I am expecting is that this thing should be more like a real sync between my org and my Git, something like that. So first question is am I right? And second is, if I am right, is there some kind of change or future?
Well, I'm not sure exactly if I understood the question fully, but you're referring to changes that you make in the org and how it relates to this idea of
He's
shifting the
admitting
source
to
of
making production changes.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
what he's doing right here.
Okay.
I'm not
adding a
developer,
field.
but I know that's not best practice.
Okay, so get out of the production.
No, but it is
or
best.
in Sandbox.
Adding an email template.
Sandbox is great. Right, and so have you seen the demo? You've watched some of the demos with the Scratch orgs and how you can make a change in a Scratch org and it comes back as source, and it updates only that one little piece. We will be expanding that into other wise places to do development like sandboxes. So at some point, in the future, you'll be able to make changes in Sandbox and have it come back out to your VCS if that's where the source of truth is for that metadata.
But if he adds metadata in a sandbox, will it go back into his Git? I think that's what he's asking. Like,
Not automatically.
Does it go backwards?
I'm not asking about development or for development side is easy. Usually I'm developing on my, on my computer, but if I'm changing an email template, if I'm changing a field, usually if I'm a small org, I'm doing it on production. Really, not always, but, and this
So
metadata.
right after this talk at 2 o'clock, or 2:15 with my colleague over here, we're talking about this exact same thing. How do you go for what we call the happy soup, which is that everything's in the org and not well organized, and how do you get it organized? And that is talking downstairs at 2:15. So please come down if you.
Which session?
It's breakout room 3, I think. Yeah. And maybe it will answer some of those questions. But yes, you will. The round trip is what is the idea. You organize it, and then you still have that round trip. If it happens to be in the sandbox and you've organized it, it will all be kind of smooth flowing.
Okay, thank you.
I want to follow up on that. I think that's indicative of a large population, a large user base in the Salesforce community of the casual developer sounds bad, but the occasional developer, the admin developer who's doing a little bit, they're not spending all their time writing code on the Salesforce platform, where they just need to jump in and look at something. And I preface this, I love everything that's happening with Salesforce DX, but to me it's taking it in the opposite direction where I want it to go. I want it to come more on platform. And I'm curious about the developer console in the browser, being able to track metadata changes within the org. And the reality is that, yeah, you should be making as few changes in production as possible, but you're then deploying your changes there eventually. And since production is the source of truth, I want to see a change log of everything that's ever been pushed to production and change there without having to go out to an external repository to do that. Is that anathema to where things are going with Salesforce DX, or will we have more support for in-browser architects, admins, everybody who's responsible for the shape of the org, being able to see it in their Salesforce environment, sandbox, or production?
Safe harbor?
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Yeah.
once again, this foundational piece that we have to, what we call packaging too. Sometimes we're not very creative in our naming. And that foundational thing, that foundational unit will be the agent of distribution of all metadata. And thus, since we have this now container, we will track it. You will be able to move it between orgs. We are going to fix change sets, in other words. Like that's the way we say it around in our org sometimes is that. So come back to Dreamforce, you might hear some more. Is Wade here?
And if you follow...
There he is. Right? You're going to say, might
Wade's
say
over there
something in
cringing.
Dreamforce? Would you like to add anything, Wade? Okay.
How about the developer console? It seems that it's been forgotten for a long time. It's buggy, and but it would be nice if we could use it when
Yes,
we need to.
it is being rewritten not as developer console, but as a set of tools that all IDEs can consume. So that means if you
Are we
get
always gonna need
Illuminati
an
Cloud,
external?
use that excellent product, you'll be able to get those same features if you use our VS Code plugins, if you use
Are
our
we
Eclipse
always gonna need
plugins.
an external
We're
app
kind of
to look
moving
at
those
code?
capacities
I
outside of
think
development.
there's a couple of parts to that. The first part, getting DX to where it is now and getting DX to GA involved a huge amount of heavy lifting on packaging, on the metadata structures, and all the stuff that has to happen. Console, I think you're right, it's sort of been out there for a little bit. I think that you're going to end up in the safe harbor future. You definitely have the standardization view of like VS Code and Eclipse and all that kind of stuff. We also have tools that are pure admin tools, and there's a blurring. We need to figure out what, we're somebody who's writing a little bit of code, but not a lot. Maybe there's something that we need to figure out there and what that looks like. But now that we have the underpinnings solidified, we have flexibility on the tool chains, options at the top, whether it's for a pro dev or an admin or a casual programmer. So we have options now, whereas we didn't have options before the heavy lifting of DX.
Thanks.
Hi. I noticed in the past when Salesforce changes versions, it sometimes there's a difference in how the metadata is represented in the XML. So I noticed recently when there was a change in how pick lists are represented in the XML between pick list values and something else. I forgot what it was. If we're going in the direction of source-driven development, those automatic changes where the XML just gets transformed automatically behind the scenes, so you upgrade your IDE to like Spring, and then automatically it downloads a new version of all the objects, the metadata. It's completely, there's a new version of it, and some things have changed. How will that work when the source of truth is in your repo? So that also needs to get automatically updated when a version changes.
Are you talking about ordering of the
he's
fields?
talking about the API when we changed pick lists and when we
Sure, but
they had to actually change the form of the XML.
If your source doesn't change, correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, if your source doesn't change API version, then there should be no difference in the.
Correct. So this is essential to our API versioning.
Yeah.
That's how API versioning is. So if you have a checked-in source of truth, like Phil's mentioning, that will always work. We're not going to break it. Now, can I say that we've had a few bugs? Yes, we have.
Yes.
And this was a very unfortunate change because it was significantly different. But generally, we change behavior between API versions every release from day one. From the first release, I'm sure that's fundamental to how we do API versioning here. That will always happen. We would never automatically go change your source for you because that means we are now controlling the source of truth and not you. The idea is that you always have control of that. It will always work. We will not break that. If we break it, you file a bug, and we go out and fix it because that's not where our contract is with you.
But you do want your repo to be to the latest version of the API as well. You don't want to be stuck in an old version of the API either.
Correct. But every once in a while, we make it painful, right? And that's the one you're bringing up was a particularly difficult one because we completely changed our mind. That's not typically what most of our behavior.
It was one version, actually. You deprecated.
Right, well, okay. Maybe that's why they changed their mind so much. Yeah. Is anybody from Custom Schema here? But we just made a behavior change to perm sets at the API level. The source looks the same, but it operates differently. And so we have these release notes to explain this, and you have to kind of keep up. Between versions, it's not going to be completely free. Sometimes you're going to have to change the source yourself. But at least if you have the control of the source of truth, at least you know what you've done, and you have source tracking and history and everything else. And we could do a better job of once in a while when we really cause some pain, like the global pick list.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully an easy question. So sometimes with deprecating fields or changing field types, it's very painful if they're referenced in Apex classes. Is there any plans to simplify that process to help find where fields may be referenced when deploying them?
It's a good question. I don't think that's on the roadmap, but let me check.
We are aware of the problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, it is a simple question, but it's a complicated answer.
Yeah. Those are the best ones.
I couldn't even give you a fuzzy "we're fixing it" story. So, but we're very well aware of the issues, and hopefully with improved SFDX and the source control and everything, hopefully some of that will be easier.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, my question's around DX and a little bit about the source of truth and that kind of stuff. When people are like source controlling code and changes that they make in orgs, generally there's kind of two different parts, right? There's like actual like code that you're writing, like Apex classes, triggers, Visual Force, Lightning, whatever. And then there's the sort of metadata, which is like the XML that gets changed when you make a declarative change. But technically it's also changing code in the org, the actual like XML and stuff like that. Does DX require you to actually like source control all of the and like commit and all your code for the XML in the background as well to actually know that those changes have been made, or is it strictly going to like use the org?
Yeah, there's another way to look at this, right? Mm-hmm. Forget that it's called XML. Yeah. It just looks like a bunch of characters, and you know that those characters, when you have a string of them, will make a behavioral change. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really make any difference if it's XML or Apex when it comes to the source of truth, right? Yeah. So absolutely, you want all that stuff.
Cool. That's just
and as a customer of DX, as Jim and his teams are building this, I've been using it a lot and definitely been peppering them with questions. I find my behavior because I'm a developer sort of changes. Instead of going into setup to add a new field, I'll just go into the XML and just edit it myself. And it just becomes very natural to bounce between that whole environment, and then you push the whole thing to your scratch org and test it.
Yep,
So I just
totally.
find that that's been my change.
Yeah, no, totally, that makes sense. It's just because like a lot of the time I've seen people who'd like, yeah, they're just pushing code changes, but really it's also the declarative changes that are making code changes in the background that'll also have to be pushed along with that. So maybe that helps. With
Right, and if you think about it, they're all dependent on each other, right?
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
Metadata refers to Apex, Apex refers to some metadata field,
Yeah.
et cetera, right? So we always want that to keep.
I think the mindset shift is the scratch org. The org used to have a bunch of stuff, and you'd have to get your org all configured and do all this stuff, and then you'd get your code into it, and it was just like a jumbled mess. And now the scratch org is essentially just throwaway. You use the term ephemeral, and it's like it doesn't matter. You push your code there, and it's done. And so you can replicate it a bunch of times. You can have teams of developers working on it if you want to. So
Cool. And I actually have another question that's kind of on another side, but often I work with an implementation partner, and we have a lot of sort of like transitioning from other systems over to Salesforce, and a lot of sort of data tools and like transforming all that data and stuff like that. It's very, very like heavy data focus. A lot of the time, the best tools and stuff like that are like external ETL tools, and not necessarily like native data loader and stuff like that. It's pretty limited, and kind of like especially for like consistent stuff. There's stuff with like external objects and stuff like that kind of exists but are like super expensive, not necessarily the best way. Is there kind of plans in the future to sort of look into native Salesforce ETL tools?
I can answer that, but unless someone, do you want to grab it? Not. We have a team. There is a team that does work on this. And we're so happy having these external vendors that do some really great stuff. So I think it will always be a partnership. How's that sound? It is not our primary focus, but we do need to make sure you can do what you need to do.
Totally. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I would say we do have several teams on it, which we want to make data as easy as possible to get into Salesforce. ETL connectors, it's a very deep, wide, complex space, and we really do rely on our partners to help us there and help our customers.
we got time for one more question.
Okay, yeah. So we had a very old Salesforce system recently remodeled, or you can say revamped, to Lightning, and all of our users are so excited. They are happy, super excited with the new thing. And I also heard the rumors that our stock price went up because of the new thing. But all good, right? Now, some of the things we have been working with closely with the Lightning team, Shauna and Michael and the team. So we reported a couple of issues on the performance from spring to summer. There's a lot of improvement, and then things are happy. Now, one of the few things that, like the basic functionality that is supposed to work in Classic, not working in Lightning. Example, like the dependent pick list things are not working as they're not behaving as they are supposed to behave in the Classic.
Mm-hmm.
So we reported that. I think yesterday I was talking to Michael, and then it's supposed to be developed or fixed and released in the month of February next year. So I was kind of wondering, this is not a release, but it is, I believe it's more of a bug than because my users are, this is a simple basic functionality is supposed to work, why it is taking such a long time. So do you have, I know Michael already gave me the timeline, but do you have any comment on that?
So I don't know the specific issue, but definitely let's talk afterwards about the specific issue. I think that, Sean will definitely chime in, but we have a lot of things that we're trying to get done at the same time, and maybe the prioritization is off for this particular issue. I'm not 100% sure. You might be familiar.
Sure. So it turns out, despite our best efforts, rewriting the UI for 16 years of functionality is hard work, and it's taking us a lot of time. So we had to start somewhere, and we started with Sales Cloud, and we started with a kind of MVP in Sales Cloud a year and a half ago. And what we've done with the help of our own product data science team is look at groups of features that people use together. So when you look at our roadmap and why on earth did they deliver this feature before this feature? There is a method to our madness, and a lot of it is around unlocking as much as many people who can use Salesforce at one time, and sometimes it requires a group of features together. Everyone who uses contracts also uses orders and quotes, so it doesn't make sense for us to just do contracts. We have to do all of these other things together. So when you look at our roadmap and you're like, why is this basic thing not there yet? That's a lot of it. It's probably something that has a very long tail that's not connected to a whole bunch of users. It doesn't mean we're not going to get to it, but we're really looking at the move to Lightning. I mean, I get the question a lot, when will you have 100% parity? And I don't know that we ever will, because I think what you're seeing is there's a lot of new ways of doing things. Not every single feature is going to come over, but we are putting them on the roadmap. And as you see, we're trying to be more transparent about that roadmap. We announced this week, lightningroadmap.com. Right now it points to our components roadmap, but over the next few weeks we'll be aggregating all of our publicly facing roadmaps. I mean, we used to keep those things in locked briefcases, like handcuffed to PM's arms. We're so tightly controlled on our roadmaps, and it's a whole new era of transparency. I mean, a year ago, there's no way we would have told you that something was coming in spring. We haven't even 100, like that list is in progress, but we want to be more transparent because we know you're building your own roadmaps, and the worst thing that could possibly happen from our point of view is that you build functionality and within months we deliver it. So we want to make sure that you have full visibility into what you're doing so that you can plan rollouts efficiently and where to focus your development effort. I hope that helps.
Yep.
That's it. With that, I think we're out of time, but we're happy to talk afterwards, and thanks everybody for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.